This is the fourth and final of these workshops. So we great to see some familiar faces here, some people who've faithfully attended some or all of the previous workshops. But yeah, this will be a particularly exciting one, because in this workshop we're going to explore the questions of navigating intellectual property and navigating ethics as the startup as the founder of the SynBio startup. So two related but in some ways quite different topics, and looking forward to some really exciting discussion about those. I'd like to start by acknowledging the fact that I'm on the lands of the Wadawurrung people in Western Victoria, and they've been the traditional custodians and owners of these lands for many tens of thousands of years. So I'd like to acknowledge that and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and future, and elders of other Indigenous communities that might be with us today. So as I mentioned, we've got an exciting program planned for this evening. We've got very pleased to have two guest speakers with us this evening. Dr. Sean Klinkradt from Baxter IP and Dr. Jacqueline Dalziell from Macquarie University. And I'll say a little bit more about them and introduce them properly in a moment. Yeah, really looking forward to hearing from them. Before we get to them, we'll actually give Jason an opportunity to remind us about why we're here and about the UNSW Founders SynBio 10X program. Then we'll hear from our speakers. We'll have a decent chunk of time for questions and answers with our speakers. And then after we wrap things up, there'll be time for some informal networking and breakout rooms with Jason and the rest of the attendees. So really looking forward to this. I'm probably should introduce myself. I'm Jonathan Lacey from Praxis Innovation, and we're helping UNSW founders run these workshops. And my colleagues Emily Chang and Rachel are with us here this evening as well. So I'd like to hand over now to Jason Whitfield, the SynBio 10X program manager, to tell us a little bit about that program and how this kind of discussion fits into the context of that program.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. Kia ora, everyone. I'm Jason Whitfield, and I'm coming to you from Bedegal land here. And yeah, so we're here at number 4. So if you've seen 3 of these previously, apologies. If you haven't, welcome. Strap in for a rapid 10 minutes. So I am the program manager of SynBio 10X, which is an open accelerator for Australian SynBio startups run by UNSW founders. And what's founders, you ask? Well, we're Australia's leading university-based entrepreneurial support program. And here we help entrepreneurs to translate their ideas and research into startups that can deliver commercial outcomes. And what really sets us apart is that we can help you across the entire funnel for everything from curiosity to entrepreneurship and commercialization through to scale up of things that result in startups. We're there and on hand on campus to help staff, student and alumni through our 10X program, interest agnostic program, our services like Coaching Connect, New Wave for women who are interested in getting into the entrepreneurial space, becoming founders themselves, right through to our 2 national programs, Health 10X and SynBio 10X. And we really like to think of ourselves as that little sun in the gift there that is taking you as the rocket, accelerating you and sending you on your journey towards getting investment ready and creating impact. A lot of the people ask, why SynBio? Why are you running a SynBio accelerator? And for me, my background is in synthetic biology. I was a SARA FSP fellow doing research in this space, and I kind of saw we really created a base of researchers that all became really well aligned on what they thought SynBio was and where they thought it could go in Australia. And I think there's in the SynBio roadmap, as well as the Acola one, they saw that it could be actually a $40 billion industry in Australia. And in Australia, and globally last year, there was more than $18 billion investment in this space alone. So we really feel that in Australia, there is this great pool and resource of researchers doing SynBio, but it's about understanding where can those ideas go. There are a lot of incubators around. We have some commercialization programs, but it's about acknowledging the importance of the need for specialist infrastructure and support for biotech and SynBio in their early stages. And I think for us, SynBio really provides that. The SynBio 10X program provides that, where we are going to open our doors here at UNSW to provide lab space and business coaching to ensure that the early stage startups that come to us have the best chance of success. And why 10X? Why come to us and not anyone else? So what's really great about this is the buy-in that we've had across the university. So founders, obviously we're aligned to creating impact for founders and early stage tech startups, but also the Biotechnology and Biomolecular Sciences School, or BABS, and the RNA Institute have all come together to create what we think is a really unique accelerator offering. We're able to combine the proven business coaching, global mentor network, access to venture capital and angel investors, and the mentorship networks we can provide with founders with the labs, PC2 lab space, and the facilities and R&D expertise that UNSW offers. We feel like we're able to combine those to provide an experience and support framework for startups that you can't really find anywhere else. And I guess the other thing that we get to offer is that Main Sequence has really stepped up, and they've put themselves in the line here by they are prepared to invest in each of the 6 startups that come through our program with a first stage investment of $120,000 via SAFE, with the potential of a $380,000 follow-on contingent upon hitting milestones. And one of the questions I think that you want to think about is, if you've ever wondered how to get the attention of Australia's leading deep tech VC, it's programs like this. This is not a truly altruistic thing from them. This is them really putting their flag in the ground and saying they think SynBio is something for the future, that Australia's bioeconomy is something they want to be a part of, and they putting their money where their mouth is and really supporting it. So the other question you're probably wondering is, why are you running this session? We've done sessions on help you now understand how to get cash through the fundraising AMA we did. Phil Moore from Main Sequence came in and did customer discovery. So now you guys will know who your customer is. And last week we had Peter French, our entrepreneur in residence from SynBio 10X, talking about problem solution validation and helping you understand how to actually validate your idea and some of the steps you need to go through and the frameworks in terms of regulatory processes you need to understand. And now you know all of that, but the other question is, do you have freedom and license to operate? Do you need to protect yourself legally? And is what you're proposing even ethical? As much as we all want to be Nick Cage here from Con Air, doing what you want whenever you want, it's just not the world we live in, and nor should it be. I think there are a lot of things and pitfalls you need to understand, and we're really lucky to have these 2 experts tonight that are going to be able to talk for a short period of time and then answer your questions. And the reason we did this is that it's a short kind of taste of the kind of things that we can give you in 10X, and providing a really SynBio specific lens to the problems that you have. Just to give a quick summary on what SynBio 10X offers, for 6 startups, there will be 6 months of support in terms of PC2 lab space and our UNSW R&D facilities. Yeah, just about. And expertise. You'll provide there will be the proven business and commercialization coaching from UNSW founders in our mentor network. We don't just bring you in, give you a pat on the back and send you on your way. We actually support you along your whole journey and are there for you to call on even after the program if you have any questions as your company grows. Through the program, you get one-on-one meetings with our entrepreneur in residence, Peter French, who has a CV so long, I would just recommend you look him up on LinkedIn because there's a lot there to kind of comb through. We have access to a 500+ global mentor network. And I think the thing that really sets us apart is we're able to offer the $140,000 investment through Main Sequence and ourselves via SAFE, and also potential access to $30,000 in service vouchers from Bioplatforms Australia. So that's, I say, potential access because the people who come into this program, they will apply to them saying that we need to use any of your many analytical services around the country and any of the omics, mass spectrometry, you name it, they can do it. And they'll approve that and you can have $30,000 worth of service from them. But also at the end of this 10-week accelerator program, you get the opportunity to pitch to our investor network. And that's truly a demo day where you can face-to-face, have these sit-down meetings, pitch to them, and it's a really unique opportunity to build connections with potential investors and also kind of the wider investor network that we have here, access to UNSW founders. In terms of who we're looking for, it's a national program, so we're really open to everyone across Australia, as long as you can have a registered startup, you have a clear IP status, and gee golly, that's a good thing to have as vague language, because Sean Klinkradt is going to take you through what we mean by that right after this. But really for us, with SynBio, we say we're a SynBio 10x, but really it's about if you're engineering or using biology to tackle big problems and create impact. And so that's what we think of when we think of SynBio. We want you to kind of be a little bit further along your way, maybe a proof of concept and beyond. We're not really in the interest of funding kind of exploratory work. We want you to have a clear concept of what you want to do and what you want to achieve. And for us, we're going to give you the tools through our pre-accelerator program, accelerator program, of how to really make that happen and really give you the finer details and skills to kind of go out, seek out who your customers are, make your business models and understand your go-to-market strategies, but also understanding the IPs, frameworks, and also regulatory landscape that you kind of need to function within. And also the other thing that we need is that one person in your team at least needs to be able to commit to 1 day per week during our pre-accelerator, and I'll go into the dates of when that is soon, but also be able to commit to being on site in our accelerator program. So the pre-accelerator will be hybrid. Key dates, I've red circled it. It's 15th of May. That is less than 2 weeks away to get your full applications in. And we are getting some applications, quite a few applications in now. That's me trying to create FOMO for all of you people. They're sitting on the fence. And so we have, by 15th May, we need you to fill out your complete application. And then 30th May, 24th of June is when our 15 lucky teams will be selected for the 4-week pre-accelerator program, where we will take you through a lot of skill development and kind of give you an idea of what will happen in the full accelerator. Over July, we'll then go through the interview process. The top 10 teams from that accelerator, pre-accelerator, and through the applications will all be interviewed. And then the lucky 6 will be selected for the 10-week accelerator program that runs from the 18th of August to the 26th of October, with the demo day happening early November. And during that period, we will be onboarding you into UNSW as adjuncts, so you can be internalized, get all the IDs, do all the amazing online health and safety training, so then you can access all these UNSW facilities. So if you need help with your application or understand what you want to do, I suggest filling out an EOI that'll let you have a look at the application form, and then you can reach out and ask me any questions you have. If I still haven't convinced you by the end of that, please just go on the website, have a look again, familiarize yourself with everything that I blasted through there, or just send me an email and I will continue my sales pitch to you. And I'm not sure why I have to sell it so hard, because this is one of the most incredible opportunities. I think it's to be on the ground floor of Australia's bioeconomy is something not everyone gets to say they were. And if I have convinced you, pull the trigger and reply, put in that EOI and fill out the application form. And I really look forward to chatting to you all more. And that's me. I feel like I got through that in absolute record time, 4 times, and I'm nailing
it. Thanks, Jason. Yes, getting
Thanks,
faster and smoother every time. So if people, as Jason said, if people do have questions, please ping Jason by any of the means that he suggested there. As Jason said, one of the things we want to do this evening is give you a little taste of the sort of environment that you'll be operating in, if you do make your way into this accelerator. So with that in mind, we'd like to introduce the first of our speakers this evening, and that is as Jason said, Dr. Sean Klinkradt. A little bit of history as to who Sean is. He's a registered Australian and New Zealand patent attorney. He has more than 20 years of experience in IP. He also has a PhD in neuroscience from RMIT University in Melbourne. Sean's worked for major intellectual property firms in South Africa and Australia, where he's gained experience in patent applications in fields including pharmaceuticals, biotechnology, medical devices, veterinary products, and chemicals. So the kinds of things that we've asked Sean to talk with us about in the next 10 minutes or so is these 2 questions up here on the screen. What are the key intellectual property principles and considerations that early stage SynBio founders need to bear in mind? And what are the common pitfalls that trip these founders up? So Sean, over to you.
Thank you. I'm just going to take over the screen for a while, if you don't mind. Just let me know if you can see that. Okay, excellent. So I'm based in the north of Melbourne. It's in the Wurundjeri Willem people's land. It's lovely out here. I don't know if I'm as far away as Jonathan, but the further I can get into the country, the better for me. Now, the things that I've been asked to speak about, I'm just going to quickly talk about them now. So as Jonathan said, there's certain things that we need to think about. So under those key principles and considerations, these are the good things to know. These are important things that you need to keep in mind. They're going to be peppered throughout here. I'm not going to be saying this is something that you need to know. You'll pick it up pretty quickly that you need to know those things. And then the traps. There are traps everywhere. So one of the easier things that you can do, and I do this with my clients that are in startups as well, is build a really close relationship with the IP person that you're going to be relying on, close enough so that you can call them and hope to God not to expect an expensive bill. So work on that. Just kind of try to build that relationship up. I've got a young startup that I'm working with in Tasmania, and we talk to each other probably 4 or 5 times a week, which if you were being billed, that would be their entire budget. So we've built up a really nice close relationship that allows them to call in and say, I'm thinking about this, or I need new IP, we're moving into a new area. Can we work on this? And one of the things that I'm doing in this area to help them avoid these pitfalls is also teaching them how to actually prepare the important part of a patent so that they can come to me with the stuff that is almost ready to go. Otherwise, if they arrive with a blank slate, their bill is really high. And startups don't have money to throw away. They've got to save everything. So important things are to keep in mind the good things and then the bad things as well. So I'll point those out as we go along. There are different types of IP. There's registered IP, and the important one for people in this group is no doubt patents. There's others as well. We won't really worry too much about them. If you need to know more about them, I'm more than happy to talk you through them. So in the registered ones, the important one is number 1, patents. In the unregistered one, the important one is again, number 1, copyright when you're doing your written work. And just so you know, I'm more than happy to make the presentation available. So if you want a copy of that, I'll speak to Emily and she'll just make it available to you. So then you can just pay attention and pepper me with questions rather than trying to write everything down. It'll save you a lot of RSI as well. When you're looking at patents, think of 4 things. Can I patent this? Is it new? Is it obvious? Does it do what it says it does? Those are the 4 important things that a patent attorney wants to know from you. So when you come to us, almost guaranteed, this one that is on screen now is not going to be a problem. But I have to tell you about it because it's the first test that every patent gets subjected to. And when you speak to patent attorneys, or one day, hopefully not, you in court, they'll talk about patentable subject matter in a way that is a bit odd, that goes all the way back, like 400 or 500 years back to legislation that defined patentable subject matter so well that 400 years later, we can still use it. So it was designed, it was drafted in 1624, and we still use that definition. That's how well they did it. And under normal circumstances, the people, my people, not the dark arts people that do algorithms and all those type of things, they're not going to have a problem with this, but I'll tell them it's going to be important if you're doing sequences. So if you've got DNA sequences, the halcyon days where we used to be able to claim everything's gone, right? That's not there anymore. That's all gone. So under manner of manufacture, that's our one point where we kind of grind our teeth because that's being taken away. We have ways of working around that as well. The courts have decided that DNA, just as it is just information. We're not bringing anything new by sequencing something. Everybody knows how to sequence things. So manner of manufacture, usually I'll find a way around it for you, but I will alert you to the fact that in some cases, just taking the DNA out of the animal, the plant, or the bug, or whatever you do, is not going to be an easy game for us. We're going to have to work our way around it. And we've got ways of working around it. These other ones that are on screen here, dark arts, usually we don't have to worry too much about them. I get a lot of queries about this, so I will explain it. If anybody ever needs to know, you're welcome to contact me about that. Here's the next thing. So the next thing is this novelty is a real issue. Now, most of the people, young startups, biotechy people, or in bio and engineering in general, don't realize quite how much of a useful resource patents are, particularly in the USA. If you want to find out what's being done in that area, you search the US Patent Office and you just go Google patents, right? Don't try and do all the hard ones. It's taken me 26 years how to learn how not to use the European Patent Office database. I still struggle with it, 26 years. So just go straight into Google Patents and you search, you'll find the information. Under novelty, what you're wanting to do is make sure that you don't put all your effort into something that's not new, because then your IP is knocked out, right? And generally what you will want to look at is your invention will have a few features. Let's say it's got 3. And these 3 features are A, B, and C. If the prior art, that's the stuff that's out there already, has features A, B, and C, you stop right there. It's not novel, you've got no rights that's going to come out of this thing, right? So you just stop right there immediately. But if you look down at the bottom down here and you go, right, my invention has the same features here, again, I'm looking in a different scenario, and the prior art this time only has A and B, that means I've got an extra thing there that potentially makes me novel. The problem is, because I've got A and B over there, is it maybe obvious? And that's the next test that we have to flip over to. And in patent law, we call that test inventive step. Inventive step is probably the most challenging of the challenges that are going to be thrown at us in the patent office. Remember, your patent will be examined by people who are really good at their job. A lot of people think that as the inventors, they're quite sort of, they believe that they're much more informed than the person that might be examining this. Almost every single examiner that will examine in this field has a PhD. And they have 20 years or 30 years of experience in seeing through your story. So you haven't even started your story yet, and they know where you're going. So this is the one that they really have fun with us. And this is the one that really makes my working day can be kind of challenging. What we have here, if you look here, you'll see again, we have this invention. It has 3 features, A, B, and C. In the prior art, I find A and B combined. And in the prior art, I find A and C combined. Now, you don't have to be very dim-witted to work out, or very bright rather, to work out that maybe if I look and I go A and B, I could do A and C. Could I do A, B, and C? And that's the whole obviousness thing. So the examiners will look at this and they'll go, so you've got A, B, and C. Prior art has got A and B. Other prior art has A and C. Or just the person who's in the field has enough common general knowledge about C. So just because that's what they do every day, they look at this and they go, A, B, and C. Oh, hang on, what about C? I know about C. You don't even have to find it in a document. The examiner can look at you and say, I know what this field's about. A and B is definitely in this document. C is known to everybody in this field. It's common general knowledge. I'm going to stitch the 2 together, and there's your challenge. Now try and beat me at my game. So this one there is the inventive step one. This one provides us with a lot of work. So you need to know that you don't want to go into all this time and effort and think, first of all, find out later that it's not new. So remember, not new means anywhere in the world. I've had an objection raised against me by a master's thesis in a tiny little South Korean university in Korean. I don't speak Korean. All right. So they will look and they will find these things and they'll throw them. They can find it anywhere in the world, anytime, any place, any language. Right. And they'll bring it out and they'll throw it at us. So you want to make sure that when you're going into something, that you're not reinventing the wheel, to belabor a good old metaphor for us, or saying, the examiners, they'll be able to stitch things together as well. And in the profession, that's called mosaicing. They'll take a little bit from this one, a little bit from that one. The more they take from different documents and things, the happier I get, because that means how desperate they are. right? So then I can find something to fight with them about and say, oh, come on, you took it from that document, you took it from that document, I can beat you at your own game. And that's what we will then do. So lots of documents makes it a little bit better, but if they just got 2 and they come up with some common general knowledge, that means I've got a day of thinking to do, right? So this is an important one, those inventive step ones. So we've got manner of manufacture, which is, can this thing be patented? Is it subject matter? We've got novelty. Is this new anywhere in the world, anytime, anywhere? And the next one is it inventive? The fourth one is so simple that I'm not even going to bother to show you. That is, this thing does what you say it would do, and that's utility. If I come back and I say, I've invented a pencil, my pencil will take you to the moon, they're going to come back and they're going to just look at me and go, utility. So I'll fail. All right. So those are the things that are important for you to start thinking as a young startup business. Whenever you're thinking about something and whenever you're talking to your patent attorney, those things must be in the back of your mind, or when you're talking to people with the money, the investors, that's what's going to be in their minds as well. Now, whether you like it or not, you know how relationships are. We all start off, we love each other. There's a lot of love going around. Everybody's happy. Unfortunately, we are like the marriage counselors, because this is the worst part of startups. This is where you're guaranteed to have some sort of disagreement at some time. People are not going to be happy with each other because something's gone wrong in the IP, and people will blame each other. So like any relationship, get everything sorted out well in advance. Don't go into it and think that it'll solve itself, because it will not resolve itself. Over time, it'll get worse. You will start walking past each other and doing the whole cold shoulder thing. You'll start screaming at each other, and it'll be a real problem. So you've got to resolve all your IP. And by that, I mean, make sure it's all written out. Understand what the IP is. Understand what you're bringing in. Understand what has been over you in some way. On the next slide, I'll tell you about that. What is sort of regulating you as well. When you've come in here, now, most of us probably had some sort of experience of working in laboratories, and we've been PhD students, so we've had potentially, registration documents, we've filled in other sort of documents, and all these things might have some sort of element of providing what happens to the IP generated during that process. If you're starting up a company that is spinning out of a laboratory and has brought in some postdocs, a PhD student and an honor student, make sure that you know that A, you've sorted out all what's going to happen in terms of the IP. Get yourself a nice, kind, generous patent attorney and a lawyer on board to sit down and talk to and say, this is what we're bringing in, what do we have to fix here? It's a lot of gray stuff, a lot of gray area. So you can't just say it's going to be easy, this is what it's going to be. And the reason why I say that as well is, you'll see on the next slide, all these universities will have different ways of dealing with the issue as well. So some universities might be very generous about how they treat what comes out of the university. Others are not so generous, and they might want to take everything. Now, the not so generous ones are usually going to face an uphill battle, because some case law has come out and really given them a good spanking, really, to say, in a colloquial sort of way, because they tried to take over a lot of the stuff. As a result of that, a lot of the universities have started to change their agreements. So make sure that you understand that IP problems are going to be a reality. Make sure that you fix them as soon as possible. Don't let them drag on. The big thing is, everyone that's going to be giving you money wants to know that they're making a sound investment. If you haven't sorted out your IP by doing due diligence, so you've looked around and you've gone, right, there's no patent activity in this field directly in the very fine area that I want to work. However, there is other sort of holding patents that are working with some parts of the technology or techniques that I want to use. Then you better know those, because when the investors come, usually what they do is they appoint somebody like our team to do all of that investigation for them. So then they'll say, if you're talking big money here, they're not going to just give you that money and hope to God that you're going to be able to understand what to do with it. They want to be sure that what they're giving you is going to give them some sort of return on their investment. The way they do that is due diligence. So you make sure that you are not subject to any patents. And if you are subject to patents, you have some sort of relationship that you've built up, some license agreement or something that you can work with these people so that you're not going to be visited 3 years later by somebody's patent attorney who comes to tell you, guess what, all that work that you did, thank you, you're going to have to now give us all that money because you've been doing it using what belongs to us. That's really important. Now, these are things that you also need to keep in mind. Like I said to you, depending on which university you're coming out of, the conditions are different. Some are generous, some are not so generous. So if you're bringing somebody out, or you're starting up, you're spinning out of a lab, you're spinning out of a postdoc or a PhD, like some of my clients have done, that is they've taken their PhD and they've spun that out into a small startup company. They need to know, and you need to know, what rights does the university have as a PhD student, as a postdoc. Remember, in some cases, postdocs obviously will have signed an employment agreement with the university, and the university is going to have some sort of rights potentially in whatever you've done while you were at the university. And if you take that out of the university into the startup, the university is going to want to look into what you're doing with that, particularly if you make no money, they won't care, believe me. But if you make money, they'll be there talking to you. So if you're just doing it for the love and fun, they'll let you do that. But as soon as there's money coming in, they'll be watching you and they'll want to know. The other thing is, as well, in many cases, you'll have a commercial partner. And the commercial partner will also want to know, well, I'm putting money in here. What is in there for me? Is there any rights there, or are there any rights that the commercial partners brought in? Are they going to be wanting to protect that in some way? Are you able to use it? Have you got a cross license? Have you got some sort of royalty-free license? What's your relationship? You need to work out, really, is there some relationship, and what do I need to make sure that I don't step on anybody's toes? So first of all, make sure you know where you stand with the university if you're spinning out of the university. Second of all, if somebody's giving you money and is a commercial partner helping you with things, make sure that you know where you stand with them in terms of what they've brought in. Sometimes they might bring in something and you need to then do a little bit of due diligence on what they're bringing in, because they might not have done that. You don't want to have done all the 5 years of hard slog and you find out afterwards your commercial partner brought in something that they didn't really have a right to either. So you've got to be a little bit sus about what they're bringing in, just to make sure that they're not bringing in something that comes back to haunt you. Then looking at all the inventors, remember, you probably, or you may well have somebody who could be a student working in your startup, could be anything from an honors, master's, or PhD student, wherever they may be. Any of those, are they co-inventors? If they are, what is the relationship with the university in terms of their enrollment, right? Have they assigned? So assigned means that they sign off everything that they have done to you. Now, watch out for those agreements that say you can do this in advance. I can't give away something that I don't know what I've done. So sometimes they'll say, you've assigned all the rights to us. Well, as I say, I can't give you something that I don't know exists, but I can agree to do it. So sometimes in your agreements, you'll see you agree to assign in future if something comes out. So you've got to make sure that you've got that all covered up with the students, and likewise with the contractors as well. So the contractors that might work for you, you might need somebody who is a genius at a technique that you unfortunately don't have those skills in. And they do all this work, and you want to make sure that they assign it to you, because if you don't, it's theirs. So you've got to make sure that that chain of ownership extends from when it starts with the inventors all the way through to the company, the startup company that it is. And the inventors will always have, and I'll tell you on another slide, no matter what you do, the inventors will always have a right to be an inventor. So you can't take that away from them. So you can't say, oh, well, I was just paying you money. Like in copyright, for instance, I can tell somebody to do something, and then because I've paid them money, it's mine. That's not how inventors work. They'll always have that right, but they have to then assign that right over to you. So they've essentially got to trade it across to you in a document, in a special document that is drawn up in a certain way to make sure that there's continuity in that right as well, because the first right is but one in potentially a family, which in a later slide, I'll show you how it can easily blow out. One thing can easily blow out into 20 before you know it.
Sean, we probably need to finish up here in the next minute or so.
Sure.
Thank you.
I've got basically this to do. So just these employment agreements, make sure that you've got them all in place as well, and that's all sorted out. So all these agreements need to be in place. Here, the essentials that you need to take away here is just what I said to you about inventorship. This is not negotiable. An inventor will always be an inventor. It doesn't matter how you write them up. As an inventor, it's anybody who makes a contribution to an inventive concept, not like authors. So you don't have to worry about who's first or who's last. Everybody's going to be an inventor as long as they've contributed towards that inventive concept. That's important because if you don't do that, your patent can be invalid as well. So here, just quickly to show you, you start off this process usually down here as a provisional, and then this whole process will extend over 20 years. So it's not a very short process. We will talk you through, or your patent attorney will talk you through this whole process of how you go through this from step to step to step. And again, my advice is find a kind patent attorney that you can spend some time talking to you and helping you with this. Right, and I can wrap up here. So that's the team of attorneys that I work with. I'm based in Melbourne, as I say, and then we've got people in all the various areas that can give you advice as well, from engineering all the way through to chemistry and biomedical as well. Great, thanks for chatting with me.
Thank you very much, Sean. And we have had a question posted on the chat. Maybe what we'll do is let Jacqueline give us a slightly different perspective here, and then we'll have a few minutes to deal with all the questions for both Sean and Jack at the end there. So let me introduce our second speaker here, and this is going to require a bit of a mental gear change on all of our parts, because our next speaker is going to be talking about something related but quite different. So our next speaker, as I mentioned, is Dr. Jacqueline Dalziell. Jack is a sociologist and a philosopher. She's currently a researcher at the Australian Research Council's Centre of Excellence for Synthetic Biology, and she's based at the Macquarie University node of the centre. And there her research focuses on understanding what kind of values drive the synthetic biology research within the centre, and how ethical challenges are identified and addressed. Over to you, Jack.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. And thanks to Emily and Jason for inviting me as well. And thanks so much, Sean. I will just share my screen. Can everybody see that all right? Okay, all right, perfect. So I'll get started. I just want to begin with an acknowledgement of country. I acknowledge that I am recording this meeting from the lands of the Gadigal people. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you all work today. I pay my respects to elders past and present, and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of New South Wales. I also wanted to take a moment to acknowledge some recent tragedies within Indigenous Australian communities since the beginning of the year. The Dungadi teenager who died in police pursuit, a 22-year-old Noongar man who died in custody, the 5th Indigenous death in custody this year, the murder of a Yuendamu teenager, and the Gudijimara Jaja Wurrong Wiradjuri and Yorta Yorta woman, 37, whose death in prison is currently under investigation. Evidence of the staggering ongoing colonial violence in Australia. Okay, so sorry. Hi, everyone. I'm Jack. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at Macquarie University, working between the philosophy department and the ARC Centre of Excellence in Synthetic Biology. Today, I'll be talking to you about ethical considerations when it comes to SynBio. I'm going to talk you through a case study, and then lastly, offer up some thoughts that might be ethically relevant to your startup or to your startup idea. I want to preface this by acknowledging that whilst what I'm about to present is a critique, I think it's really imperative that we engage with these difficulties rather than shying away from them, especially as these challenges are central in thinking through the complications of building businesses and how SynBio interfaces with markets and economies and the wider social milieu. A reoccurring theme in an interview study of Australian synthetic biologists that I recently conducted is the gulf between doing the fundamental science and how things shift the moment they enter a marketplace. So I think having an expansive perspective beyond the lab bench is really key. As the love child and success story of synthetic biology, my colleague Wendy Rogers and I chose synthetic artemisinin as a natural starting point for thinking critically about SynBio and ethics. Oh, sorry, my mouse is playing up a little bit, it seems. Okay. Malaria is a significant health problem with a range of distressing effects, namely the disproportionately high number of infants and children who make up nearly 70% of its mortality rate. The good news is that it is both preventable and curable. 2UU discovered that an ethyl ether extract from Artemisia annua leaves, sweet wormwood, strongly inhibited malaria, and it has since become the first line of treatment for malaria globally, leading to an increase in demand of artemisinin. So for instance, public sector treatments increased from 11 million in 2005 to 287 million in 2010. Artemisinin is sourced from an estimated 100,000 small farmers in Asia and Africa, as well as wild harvesters of the crop in China. Currently, 80% of all artemisinin derived from Artemisia crops is produced in China, Zimbabwe, South Africa, and Nigeria. There are, however, some issues with artemisinin production. There's an 18-month lag between initial requisition and supply of product, as weather and harvest conditions affect the crop. And that leads to swings in price and availability. So in one year, you might have a bad crop due to poor weather, and then in the next year, you might have an oversupply, which causes low prices. So these challenges catalyze a move to create a non-plant derived source. Enter Jay Kiesling, the famous synthetic biologist from the University of California, Berkeley, who decided to create a synthetic source of artemisinin. And his motivations were to decrease and to stabilize price, to make the urgently needed drug widely available, to control supply, and to help local economies in places where malaria is endemic. So I'm going to fast forward through the science, which is itself, it's really interesting. And it's actually a key part of this story, but it's too complex to fit into this presentation. So here is a diagram. So in 2013, semi-synthetic artemisinin entered commercial production. The University of California granted a royalty-free license for its synthetic yeast to Sanofi Aventis, a French pharmaceutical company. Now let's look at the promised benefits of synthetic artemisinin and how they weigh up against what has since transpired. In the interest of time, again, I've skipped over a range of details, but in condensed form, since synthetic artemisinin has been on the market, it has increased market volatility. It has been more expensive or the same price as its botanical counterpart. And this has also been exacerbated by a lack of transparency and monopolies in information about key details of synthetic artemisinin. Kiesling's professed aim was to increase availability of artemisinin to address morbidity and mortality of malaria. But if we look at ways to decrease morbidity and mortality from malaria, it's unclear that synthetic artemisinin is the answer. Okay. So there are multiple other and kind of preferable strategies. So one is malaria eradication, and this is done through killing mosquitoes, through eliminating habitat. Another is malaria prevention, and that's insecticide-treated mosquito nets, indoor spraying, vaccination. So recently, Oxfam said that the proportion of children in sub-Saharan Africa sleeping under a bed net has increased from 2% to 39% in the last 10 years. This has brought down the number of malaria deaths dramatically in many countries, such as Namibia, Swaziland, Ethiopia, Senegal, and Zambia, where deaths have been cut by between 25 and 50%. There's also the complication of malaria diagnosis. There needs to be an increase in access to rapid, accurate testing to avoid over and misdiagnosis. So for instance, in Angola, there were errors of over 80% in malaria diagnosis. And this leads to overtreatment, to increased risk of resistance, and to a lack of accurate epidemiological data, as well as unnecessary costs to patients and communities. While the treatment of choice for malaria is artemisinin, it can be obtained from synthetic artemisinin from Sanofi, but they need to increase the yield to bring it into a kind of cost desired range, or you can get it from increasing the natural production of artemisinin. And we might do that through increasing the area under cultivation, through a better understanding of seasonal variation in the crop when planting harvesting, selective breeding of high yield cultivars, genetic modification to increase yield, and the engineering of plant heterologous systems for artemisinin production, which is already in the proof of concept stage in certain tobacco plant species. Simply put, artemisinin is not the answer because drugs are not the answer. Selling malaria medicines, even at a small cost, excludes poor people who can't afford to pay for a full course of treatment, especially women. And over time, that also increases resistance to malaria drugs. The informal private sector doesn't have the ability or the incentive to provide correct diagnosis and treatment. And like kind of aforementioned, a lot of fevers are malaria. So an informal private sector provider is the wrong place for sick people to go. We might then ask, why was SynBio promoted at the expense of other and pre-existing solutions to malaria treatment? Oh, sorry, I don't know why my mouse has decided to do this. Okay. One way of assessing the success or failure of a SynBio intervention might be to think about cost and opportunity cost. Kiesling estimated that the labor required for the development of synthetic artemisinin has taken over 150 person years of work. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation donated over 50 million, but synthetic artemisinin was also aided by the funds and resources of a startup, several very rich universities, a not-for-profit, and a pharmaceutical company. And due to this complex and long-term funding structure, technology watchdog ETC Group have argued that it is impossible to know the true cost structure of the project overall. Sanofi's price is still over or on par with the price of botanical artemisinin, and it was granted the license from Kiesling on a royalty-free basis. What are the politics at play in funding this particular project and not exploring others? On the effects of synthetic artemisinin, the Royal Tropical Institute stated, pharmaceutical companies will accumulate control and power over the production process, artemisia producers will lose a source of income, and local production, extraction, and manufacturing of artemisinin in regions where malaria is prevalent will shift to the main production sites of Western pharmaceutical companies. If we think about harms, we might consider threats to farmers. And there have been multiple concerns voiced about farmers' livelihoods. So artemisinin is grown in resource-poor areas of Africa and Asia, and it's a necessary but precarious source of farmers' livelihoods. Synthetic artemisinin could potentially result in farmers not or under planting due to anticipated competition. It could increase or introduce further market disruptions. It could create an opportunity for monopoly over a supply chain. And it's important to kind of understand that these kind of concerns happen in a context of some trepidation around this pattern taking place with other Western biotech companies who have produced the synthetic versions of previously farmed botanical products, which is obviously a theme in SynBio when you're looking at synthesizing flavors and fragrances and stuff like that. So we might consider other harms as well here, like the environmental impact of habitat loss of the sweet wormwood forests. We might think about the lack of information. So the partisans anti-SynBio literature versus commercial and confidence material is quite difficult to negotiate. And this kind of lack of transparency is also antithetical to the democratization of science kind of narrative that's prevalent in SynBio. There's also a question of filling a gap in the market versus monopolizing production. Initially, Kiesling wanted synthetic artemisinin to be an alternative source of artemisinin within the market, but he has since said that his vision is for it to eventually constitute the only source of artemisinin for malaria treatment. So is this a naive technofix? Sociologist of science Claire Maris has argued that it constitutes a technological fix for problems involving complex, interrelated social, economic, and environmental factors. And in 2012, Oxfam called it a dangerous distraction from other possible solutions. What counts as success in synthetic biology, and for whom? In our paper, which is an extended discussion of this case, complete with all the details I've had to omit today, Wendy and I argue that this was the wrong answer to this complex problem. Meanwhile, in 2021, the WHO endorsed the world's first malaria vaccine developed by the British pharmaceutical company, GSK, and it has since been administered to more than 800,000 children in Ghana, Kenya, and Malawi. There is now a new and long list of synthetic biology initiatives currently underway to respond to malaria treatment issues, also receiving philanthropic donations, including millions from Bill and Melinda and other sources of funding. Now, what are the takeaways from synthetic artemisinin that might inform how you go about thinking about startup development in this space? I'm going to segue now to share some starting points and how you might approach the ethical considerations in your own startup. And as a potential founder, these are the sorts of questions that are relevant to developing ethical startups. The ethical concerns run alongside and are enmeshed in the scientific and technical aspects of your research. So general questions include, how will you assess the ethical credibility of your funding sources? Is your intervention a technologized shortcut for a complex global problem? And I want to be clear here, I don't mean that a technological solution is a negative one, but rather that it needs to be situated and understood and approached in a historicized way that has context awareness and with a holistic perspective. Thinking more concretely in terms of benefits and harms, you might consider, what need is your product responding to? Are there other, better, cheaper, more sustainable ways of responding to that need? Which communities will benefit from this product? Thinking about harms, we might ask, what are the potential harms of your product? How might it be beneficial in one way and not in another? And could it be used in ways that you can't foresee? Thinking through the benefits and harms and ethical consequence of your research is just as integral as thinking about markets, cost competitiveness, and uptake in the building of a successful startup. As a philosopher, it's my contention that any assessment of SynBio needs to be located within the broader terrain of these social, political, and ethical themes. Thank you very much for listening.
Well, thank you very much, Jack. We did expect a bit of a gear change from the IP discussion to the ethics discussion, and we certainly got that. Really, both really stimulating presentations there. I as facilitator here, I haven't done a great job in time management. We asked for your time until 7 p.m. and it's very close to 7 now. Just want to firstly ask our speakers if you are able to stay back for 5 or so minutes longer, because yeah, we do want to allow people to ask questions if they have them. For those who do need to leave now, if you do have questions that you'd like to ask of the speakers, maybe just put them on the Zoom chat and we can get the speakers to maybe write an answer to the question that we can include with the recording of the session that we'll send out to you later.
I'm fine to stay a bit longer.
Excellent, thank you, Sean. Yeah, and Jack, it looks like you are too. Excellent. Yeah. So for people who do need to leave at 7, thank you very much for coming. Just going back to what Jason said at the beginning, just to remind you that applications for the SynBio 10X program are now open, but they're only open for less than 2 weeks. So if you are interested in applying, now is the time to do it. So please, please contact Jason to do that. For those of you who can stay a little bit longer, maybe we go back to the question for Sean that was posted a little earlier by Carolyn. If you contract someone at a university or research institute to perform experiments that you have designed, and the data from those experiments contributes to a patent, do they have ownership rights, and what considerations apply to their organisation ownership of IP?
So the overarching principle here is only a person who makes a inventive contribution to the inventive concept, so a contribution that is actually inventive, is going to have any rights in the invention. So we can look at this from two perspectives. Are they just a pair of hands? If they're just a pair of hands that you're paying to do the work, they've got no rights in the invention, you don't have to worry about it. If they do make some sort of contribution and you're paying them, then there's a thing about employment. You've been employed and paid to do the work. So you are contracted to invent, and the law will then require that that person actually assigns their rights. You don't want to go into a fight, so you just want to avoid that. So what you do is you say, if you're going to be doing the work for me, here's the agreement. You agree to assign anything that comes out of this because I'm giving you my money. If they say no, find somebody else to do the work. Right? That's the easiest way. So you just have an assignment and you say, there's going to be a good deal of money. You're getting a salary for 6 months. The deal is that you're going to be doing potentially inventive work. You have to assign that to me. So there's 3 different sort of levels that you can think about here. If they're not making a contribution as an inventor, they don't get anything. If they are making some sort of contribution, then you can put into the employment contract that they need to agree that if they get the money, to assign it to you. And then you have an assignment agreement. Once the work is done, you say anything that arose out of this and leads to an invention, complete this document. So that is all done as you go along. The assignment will have to be done in real time. You look at it and you go, well, this person's given us nothing. All they've done is be in a pair of hands that changed the media on the cells. They haven't made a contribution. But if they made some sort of contribution, then you need to start kicking in. Do I need to talk about assignments here? But you put that up front in the agreement that if anything comes out of this, you will agree to assign it. If they don't, they're in breach of contract, and then you can approach the court to do the whole little thing for you and make them sign it.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. And I think the theme that's kind of running through certainly your presentation and to some degree, I guess, through Dak's presentation is an encouragement for founders to kind of plan for success, to imagine that their work is going to have significant financial commercial impact, and to think at the beginning to kind of nail things down and think things through in such a way that won't become that won't raise a whole bunch of problems later on.
Yeah, people don't realize that something small might blow out. Like the drugs that treat childhood leukemia was found in a plant that people grow in their garden. Everybody's growing this. This was the commonly grown Madagascar, a Madagascan plant. And, you don't know what you're going to get out. You might be the blockbuster. Usually there's about 10,000 failures, by the way, for every successful blockbuster.
Yes.
But plan for that, and plan for the possibility of there being lots of money at stake and people being resistant to share.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, that's really great advice. And Jack, I may be stretching things a little bit here, but I'm just on that principle of kind of before one embarks on a piece of work, kind of thinking through what the ethical consequences of the work might be. I'm interested. Has the original UC Berkeley inventor of the synthetic process that you were talking about, what's their perspective now on, have they said anything about what they might have done differently had they known that it was going to turn out this way? Is there anything on the record about that?
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. I think that's a really important question. And so one of the reasons we chose this particular case study was was that everybody heralds it as a success story. It's like the prodigal son of SynBio, and when I just did an interview study with 35 synthetic biologists, and so many of them that I spoke to wheeled out artemisinin as if it was a given that it was a complete success story, which makes me wonder about how much scientists actually know about where it is in the market currently, and how much information there is about that, because I think the focus has been on achieving this synthesized kind of artemisinin precursor, and it's not been so much on the societal effects or how successful it's been. So I haven't found anything of Kiesling speaking openly in any kind of reflexive way about the work, but there are definitely other critics of him.
I'm sure
great
everybody
stuff.
knows about warfarin, right? Do you know warfarin? The
Not
blood
now.
thinning drug. So it's the one that's usually in rat poison. So that's the same drug that we take to prevent strokes and heart attacks. Warfarin is spelled W-A-R-F. The Wisconsin Alumni Research Fund came together and they put all the money into that and helped the team that were working on warfarin to develop the whole program. So, this kind of thing that you are potentially participating in here now can easily, so to sort of go back to the example, where it could become a blockbuster. You don't know. Who knew that warfarin was going to be the drug that saved many, many lives?
It's interesting. For me, like, I realized I actually saw one of the people from Amaris giving a talk about artemisinin, and I remember their talk, and they kind of did a mic drop moment about how they'd saved so many lives because they dropped the price, that the Sanofi decision was an intentional one about bringing production closer to the nations that need it. And it's an interesting thing because it's kind of like, it's the ethical question of, I guess, what they did, but then it's how they're presenting it. And I encourage people to look up Ginkgo Bioworks after this, the ethics of hype and around what you're saying you do, right? Like, because there's a legal fallback, but there's an ethical thing of like, you're advertising yourself to be something you're not. And I guess, I don't know really how to articulate the question off the back of this, but I guess it's kind of, with scientists now thinking about what they're doing, is how do you think, both of you on both sides, how do you think they should like prepare themselves for going into the world to pitch their products? Because it's what they have to do, right? They have to pitch themselves to vendors for money and to sell their products. Legally and ethically, how should they be coming at this?
Maybe just to add to that, Jason, I think, Jacqueline, your talk has been really inspiring, and we want to adopt that kind of thinking, right? But the questions that you posed at the end of the day, like, I don't know how to answer them, for instance, right? To what extent do I set a hand too hard that I'm doing the right thing? And how do I differentiate, and what metrics am I looking for to make sure that, I am just striving for compliance versus excellence, right? And that depends on the value of your startup. But those questions for me is still rhetorical, that I just don't know what to do with them.
Yeah, thanks, guys. So I guess I'll try to both answer quickly and answer both questions. So when it comes to hype, yeah, I think it's really, really interesting, and I really empathize with you guys, because I think that hype moves in interesting ways in kind of biotech, and so I think there's absolutely people who brand themselves as SynBio when they're not, because they know that there's hype and they think that branding might help attract funding. I think there is a conflict of interest where you guys have to hype and oversell what your science can do in order to get funding. So that's a kind of prerequisite sometimes. However, I think that simultaneously you're caught in this kind of bind whereby you hype to get the funding, and then your work doesn't kind of meet the criteria within a 2-year fellowship or something, which obviously it can't, and then it seems like you're not meeting your promises in an even more extreme way, and so then I think that can actually hurt science and possibly contribute to the defunding of science. And so I think with something like artemisinin, and this is why I think the question of success is so important. That sociologist of science that I quoted, Claire Maris, she talks about synthetic artemisinin and potentially souring the public's view of SynBio. So I think that's the one of the kind of undersides. But yeah, it's incredibly difficult for you guys to negotiate. And then I think when it comes to your question, Stephen, so I think, and I don't know if my answer to this is super helpful. A lot of the scientists I talk to, they do have ethical literacy, and they are alert to the kind of political questions at stake in their research, and they are altruistic in their intentions in wanting to think this stuff through. I think the major impediment at the moment are actually kind of academic labor conditions in Australia, because you need help, like you need facilitation in how you think through these issues and how you actually embed them into your research from the start, rather than calling an ethicist when you're 5 years down the track and you realize that there is actually a problem. And that's not really there. It's not incentivized academically. It's not in your KPIs. And so I think one big part of SynBio is, how do we get actual genuine engagement and integration between the humanities and the social sciences and the natural sciences here, so that the humanities and the social sciences aren't a kind of tokenistic addendum, and so that you guys actually have some of the skills yourselves to think through these questions. And I recently read this paper, and it was about yeast, and it had it had like a yeast ethics code written into the paper, and it was just this kind of half a page kind of mantra, and it was basically completely useless. It wasn't in a form that anybody could use. It didn't really translate to what you do at the lab bench, or how you negotiate all the complexities that you have to do on a daily basis as a scientist, let alone between universities or IP or industry. So trying to find ways that are practical and pragmatic for you guys to not just have these conversations with social scientists, but actually implement things into your daily work as a scientist.
Well, I'm really glad that Jack and Sean that you were there to answer those last few questions, because yeah, I found them fascinating questions, but I wouldn't have known where to start as far as the answers go. So I think you both did a brilliant job of that. Thank you.
I just want to support Jack, and say that, coming from a pure science and a law perspective, people think that you are hard-nosed and just there for the buck and for the money. But I have a strong belief that we are losing the humanities, and particularly the philosophers, at our peril. Unfortunately, we have to have them there to talk us through these finer things. In IP, for instance, IP is starting to become an issue for access to food, access to medicine, access to resources in a community that might just be sort of biopirated out and make somebody else money. And it's people that are in the philosophy department who are being just cut and dumped, that we won't have those people to talk to. And it's getting worse and worse and worse. And I don't think it's I think it's leading us down a road that is just going to be to our detriment to lose all of those people.
Yeah. That's a rather somber note on which to end this evening's discussion, but I think we ought to wrap it up now. Thank you for those who stayed back late. Thank you especially to our speakers for being willing to give us a little bit more time. Once again, just want to speak for Jason here and just remind people, if you're interested in pursuing this further and you've got some ideas, now is the time to apply for the SynBio 10X program. Thanks again to everyone who's been here this evening, and we'll let you all go now, and look forward to hopefully seeing some of you in the program. But thanks again to Jack and Sean for those really, really fascinating talks.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night. Thanks for coming.